Welcome to this week's edition of Mob Talk. I'm Dave Stratweiser.
And I'm George Anastasia.
George, Joey Merlino stepping to the plate on the biggest stage in the world, New York City, in federal court. Does he strike out or hit a home run?
Yeah, different venue, same game. Cooperating witnesses, lots of tapes, and Joey adamant about not making a deal.
All right, George, before we get to the beginning of the Merlino trial, there's supposedly, what we hear on the street, a deal on the table.
You know, there's always been a deal on the table. In the beginning, I think Joey had an offer to plead out and get 18 months to 2 years. Now there's a deal on the table, depending on who you're talking to, 3 or 4 years. Take the plea, don't go to trial. He's adamant, he's not taking a deal. He says he didn't do anything wrong. Remains to be seen.
All right, is he on a crusade here? He's never pled guilty to anything. Right. He's made the government come after him each and every time. Some people have said most of the murder charges obviously bounced off him. All of them did. Is he maintaining that reputation here a little bit?
I think that's part of what this is. I mean, he is not going to plead guilty and admit he did anything wrong, and he's going to make him bring him to trial. And that's been his modus operandi from the get-go. He doesn't work deals. It's not like New York. I mean, down here in Philadelphia, they go to trial and they look at serious time. New York, the deals are usually pretty sweet. And that's what happened in this case. If you look at it, 46 defendants, I think 43, 44 have already taken deals. Some of them getting less than a year, less than 6 months. But Joey's adamant that he's going to hold the federal government up to what they have done. And he says, this is again secondhand from people who've talked to him, the government has been more corrupt than they allege he's been.
Okay, I talked to Eddie Jacobs this week, wouldn't comment on anything of substance, wanted to know how we heard about a deal that was 41 to 48 months, that kind of stuff. Right. We would never tell him that. Right. But having said all that, he wouldn't comment on anything in terms of a deal, and said he expected to be in a courtroom trying this case.
Yeah. I mean, you got to remember with Eddie too, Eddie's in a different arena. Eddie's used to being down here in federal court in Philadelphia, being in New Jersey. He's in New York. I think he's playing by much stricter rules up there, and he's going to go by the rules. That being said, Eddie's a master at taking government tapes and turning them to his advantage. There's a lot of tapes in this case, and there's a couple cooperating witnesses whose credibility is certainly suspect. He'll be eating them up.
But it's not just about tapes this time. It's not about cooperators who you can poke holes in. There's got to be a paper trail if we're talking about health care. Remember John Terry, former Squad 1 supervisor, telling us if they got a great white-collar case with paperwork that leads right back to them, and a cooperator maybe who can guide them through all that, that's a pretty strong case.
Yeah, I mean, that's what gets lost in all of this. We talk about the cooperators, we talk about the gambling and the extortion, and maybe those charges are half-baked or not substantiated. The healthcare fraud situation is the one, I think, where Joey Merlino is going to have the most problem, because if they can establish his connection to that fraud, that's a $157 million fraud. And even tangentially connected to it, it can carry serious jeopardy for him. I think that's the charge in that case he's going to have the most problem with.
Well, let's talk about exposure here. Healthcare fraud is a max 10 years in jail. Mail fraud, wire fraud's like 5 years. If they were to put all that together, if he's convicted on all of that, he's looking at some serious time. He's 55 years old.
Oh yeah, I mean, you look at the formula and his background, how many times he's been convicted, all of that goes into determining what his guidelines are. And given that, coupled with the charges and the sentences that they bring, it's serious guidelines he'll be looking at if he's convicted. I mean, that's why this is a tremendous roll of the dice. If he's got a deal on the table for 3 or 4 years and opts not to take it, gets convicted, he may be looking at triple that time, quadruple that time when he goes in front of the judge.
And he's got started thinking about family and things like that when you're going to be away for a long period of time like that. Do you want to be away for a long period of time? What impact does that have on your family, the organization? If there's another indictment coming down the road, can he actively defend himself against another indictment while he's locked up in jail? Those kind of things. I think Joey likes to be out on the street in the mix when stuff like this is going on.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, all of that factors in, and being 55 years of age, maybe you take a different look at it than when you were 35.
Sure.
But the other thing you got to remember is, and I did the math one time, in Joey's adult life, I think he's spent almost a third to a half of that time either in jail or on supervised release.
The only one who really beats that is maybe Joseph Massimino, who's probably been in jail half his life.
Right. So, I mean, it kind of comes with the territory.
Yeah. George, 800 hours of tape. We have videotape and at least 3 cooperators. Break the cooperators down.
You got J.R. Rubio, who was working with the feds from the get-go wearing a wire. You got Pete Lavaglia, who was a
Bonanno
crime family guy who was involved in a lot of the, I think, extortion, gambling, that part of the case. And then supposedly this third cooperator, not been identified officially, but we're told it's one of those individuals in the Tampa medical fraud case, a guy named Wayne Kreisberg. Kreisberg is not a mobster, not connected with the organization, but Kreisberg, from the documents we've seen, is a businessman in Florida who was connected to Joey, and at one point he apparently was going to back Joey's restaurant down in Boca Raton. Now, how much does he know? What's he going to say? And how much does that hurt Joey? That's what keeps coming back to. He's not a witness who is going to be beat up because he's had tapes and he's lied and he's done this and he's done that, as LaVaglia and Rubio will be challenged. He's a different kind of witness, and it'll be interesting to see his credibility if and when he gets up on the stand. Other thing to remember, though, in terms of that, the medical fraud, Kreisberg is a major player in the case. He's pled guilty.
Pled guilty in this case, too.
Pled guilty in both of these cases.
Sure.
And, you know, there's been forfeiture action. I think the government's forfeiture action against him was something like $13 million, including a massive house down in Florida, multi-million-dollar home. So this is a guy who the government will say has made a lot of money out of that compound cream fraud case. Does that work against his credibility? You know, you're saying this to get out from underneath the problem you have, or does he put Joey in the middle of it?
Eddie Jacobs gets out the scalpel here and starts to dissect this case. He's been up in New York working on it. He's been down here working on it. He just came off another major case in Philadelphia, so he's getting up to speed real quick on the ramp up to the trial, that kind of thing. How does Eddie handle those witnesses?
Well, I mean, they won a couple minor victories in a pretrial hearing last week. One, I think they're going to be able to bring those FBI agents in who were the target of an internal investigation.
Right.
And they violated some kind of procedures. Number two, I'm told, both Rubio and LaVaglia have domestic violence problems that occurred while they were cooperating. And given today's day and age, to be able to bring that in could also have an impact on their credibility.
You have women on the jury here. They're going to want to hear that, and that's going to hit home with them, correct?
Well, sure. I mean, and it's kind of a follow-up to all the Me Too hashtag stuff that's been going on. This is just another example of that. It's something that the government argued is irrelevant to the charges, but the judge basically said, in today's day and age, it's coming in.
Yeah.
And that was a victory for the defense, I think.
Two good wins right there for you.
Yeah.
They can talk about the FBI, and they can talk about those domestic violence cases.
Yes, absolutely.
George, another development in the mob here in Philadelphia. Mob soldier Gaten Lucibello, who's been out of jail almost 3 years
Right.
now, and who's been on the shelf pretty much, not around the guys because he wasn't supposed to be around the guys, gets caught around the guys.
Yeah, it's curious. He's been cited for a probation violation associating with organized crime figures. And it occurred apparently back in October at a bocce ball court down in South Philly. Got a hearing coming up. He's been violated. He could be sent back to jail. His probation supervised release, it's called now, was about to end February 1st, February 2nd. And now he may be going in front of a judge and he could get sent back into jail. I'm not sure what the motivation of from the federal perspective is, other than keep the pressure on and let these guys know we're out there, we're watching you, and we're not going to go away.
All right, and the people he sees are Sonny Mazzone, who the court documents say is a made member of the mob, Richard Curo, who's the court papers again say is a convicted felon, and again, a guy named Frankie Porter, who is described in those documents as an associate of organized crime. Sonny Mazzone is actually on Gaten Lucibello's list of people to stay away from.
Yeah.
It was a brief encounter. Does that carry any weight with the judge at this hearing?
It's probably that works in his favor, but on the other hand, the documents indicate when he was first asked about this, he lied to his probation officer. That's going to work against him. Again, I'm not sure the motivation for this, other than to send a message, we're watching you. But as you said, I mean, Gaten's name hasn't come up in anything I've been aware of for the 3 years he's been out there. It's pretty low key. It's also a guy, hard to believe they might think they'd be able to break this guy and flip him. This guy's gone to jail twice. He's a genuine tough guy, and I don't think he's got that much to offer, even if they were able to get him to cooperate.
Hardcore guy,
Yeah.
not the kind of guy that's going to fold up and go crying in a corner.
Yeah. So you got to wonder, is there a broad strategy here, or is it just, you know, we're going to bust his balls? I don't know.
Yeah. Is this the hit him with a baseball bat, keep him moving kind of thing? Is that?
I mean, that could be part of it. You know, we've got a new regime in the FBI office in Philadelphia, the organized crime, and they're trying to make a name for themselves, and I think they're looking to bring back some of these old cases. I don't know that this takes them there, but it might be part of a broad strategy.
Is it to keep organized crime figures that are on the street now in Philadelphia off balance?
You know, that could be part of it. And it, you know, this stemmed not from the feds. It was Philadelphia PD organized crime guys out doing surveillance, spotted this meeting at a bocce ball court, mentioned it to Gaten's probation officer, and that's led us to where we are today.
Everybody wonders what those guys do. This is the kind of stuff they do. They watch these guys day in and day out. They take pictures. they're looking for things like this. They're looking for associations. They're looking for possible conspirators, those kind of thing. And it's that boots on the ground thing you and I always talk about that makes these cases.
Yeah, I mean, down the road, you know, that meeting may be significant in terms of something else. Who knows? That's why they're always out there watching.
Okay, props to the Philly PD on this one.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, George, Joey Merlino staying true to form, always the gambler, rolling the dice.
Very high stakes. His life's on the line.
All right, going to be interesting.
See you next time.